Welcome to Module P Overview. The purpose of Module P, or production constraints, is to identify the main production constraints in each production domain and to estimate the economic impact of each of those production constraints. What we get at the end is a list of production constraints ordered in terms of their relative importance within the production domain. There's 5 submodules within the P module. The first one, which is this one, the introduction. Then we have the setup, the input data, the outputs, and the calculations. What does that look like? As we click through, the first one is the setup. So here we're identifying between 5 and 10 production constraints that are important within the production domain. We're identifying them by the category, being soil, organic resources, crop genetics, tillage and establishment, pests, weeds and diseases, water management, cropping systems and harvest, and then corresponding subcategories and some details, notes or definitions. Of course, putting in our explanatory notes as well. What we're then doing is we're quantifying the area of each crop that is impacted by each of our production constraints. There's going to be some areas that are not impacted, and then there's going to be areas that are mildly, moderately, heavily, or even very heavily impacted. We're also assigning a level of certainty to the input lines that we're putting in. So in this case, for wheat in the winter season, the 70% of wheat in Rabi season is not impacted by runoff and soil erosion, 20% is mildly impacted, and 10% is moderately impacted. These are the thresholds for each of those 4 categories, but they're also editable as well. So we assign a level of certainty, we add some notes, and we identify the data source as well. Once we've done that, we've inputted all the data. We can go to our results page. Now, this is also set up with print boundaries. It will say that we've selected 4 crop combinations as well as 7 production constraints. It will give us the definitions, and it will also give us an idea of the certainty of the input data that we've put in. So in this case, we've got less certainty for the rice in Kharif season and the maize in Rabi season than we do for the wheat in Rabi and the maize in Kharif season. Likewise, and again, this is example data, but we're pretty certain about the data we've put in for runoff and soil erosion, but we're much less certain for the information and data that we've put in around late planting and tillage and establishment. What we then get is the results. So what we're seeing here is in the blue figure, the top 10 production constraints that are disaggregated by crop and season. So we can see that according to the data we've put in, unbalanced fertilizer use on wheat in Rabi season and late planting on wheat in Rabi season are the 2 most important production constraints disaggregated. We can also aggregate that first by crop, so we can see again that those 2 elements are both the most important because they are on, they're both 2.9 million US dollars. We can also aggregate by production constraint. So here we can see that unbalanced fertilizer use, when we aggregate crops and seasons, is the biggest production constraint in this production domain, followed by late planting. So these are the results that we can start to prioritize and think about our adaptation options, looking at the fact that these are the production constraints that are most important in this situation. Other things that we can look at in terms of unit, we can toggle between thousands, millions, and billions, and these figures will update and change. If you've used a non-USD currency, you will also see options for showing in USD or in local currency. We can also see how these calculations are made. Again, the same coloring system that we had before. Blue is data that's come from prior modules, green is input data, and orange is calculation data. Again, with those thresholds that are there, and we said those thresholds were editable, as you'll see in the video that's there for module P. So what we are trying to do in this module is to establish what are the production constraints that are most constraining in this production domain.